Hello, BIC. I hope everyone in South Korea or wherever you are watching this from is safe and healthy. And thank you for offering me this opportunity. My name is Johnson Lin. My friends and I run an independent developers community in Taipei, Taiwan. I have been in Busan twice for BIC, and I really love the city, the overall atmosphere, and the wonderful indie games festival you got there. In our local indie gatherings, we would always talk about how wonderful BIC was for that year. And others who didn't get the chance to exhibit in BIC would want to submit their games and visit Busan the next year. So it's unfortunate that due to COVID-19, a lot of the gaming events and developer gatherings have to be shut down or changed. And Taiwanese indie developers cannot enjoy BIC in person this time around. Speaking of the COVID-19 situation, as a person running developer events, I run into difficulties that all other event organizers around the world ran into in 2020. And I thought I'd like to share some of my reflections of how the indie game developers community has been dealing with the situation in Taiwan, and also maybe share some thoughts of how we might move forward from here together. As you might have remembered, the news about COVID-19 first got its way out right before the Lunar New Year of 2020. So Global Game Jam 2020 was scheduled during the weekend right after the Lunar New Year. And we have already got a few confirmed cases on the domestic news during the New Year vacation. Global Game Jam organizers in Taiwan were quite worried because we all still remember the shock that SARS outbreak brought us about 2 decades ago. And it was already speculated that this new virus was kind of similar to SARS. Taiwan's healthcare system and the government reacted very swiftly. But despite that, there weren't hard restrictions on public gatherings yet, back in January. Just recommendations and health guidelines at first. We, as Global Game Jam site organizers, had to prepare for some precautions nonetheless. In all our Global Game Jam sites in Taiwan, masks were mandatory for all jammers. Hand sanitizers and body temperature checks were required before entry. Also, we were afraid of people getting sick from other reasons during the Game Jam as well, since this is quite common when people stay up all night working and inevitably getting tired, or the AC temperature is too hot or too cold for some people during the night. Given the COVID-19 context, it would cause unease and pressure to the jammers if they just happen to be a little sick from common flu at the time. So for the sites that were in the downtown area, we also asked the jammers to go back home and take enough rest. This was our first game jam that everybody went home for the night around 9 p.m. every day. Interestingly, Global Game Jam 2020 had a diversifier called Pro Tip: all members of your Game Jam team get 8 hours of sleep. And I would like to think that all our teams achieved that. Another interesting observation is the games that were made under those kinds of restrictions actually didn't have a noticeable difference in the degree of completeness than our previous game jams. So even we lost some work time because everybody went home at night, this seems totally fine. So this might be a good note to take if you are joining any future game jams. Here's a group photo at the end of one of our sites. As you can see, everyone was masked. Around the same time, small-scale gatherings like a game jam site, around 50 people was one thing. But some huge physical conventions like Taipei Game Show was another story entirely. Even though I'm not involved in Taipei Game Show organizing, I knew a lot of local indie developers were really looking forward to it. And there were more and more international game studios, big and small, coming to Taipei Game Show to exhibit and showcase their games in previous years. But unfortunately, Taipei Game Show was the first big gaming event of the year on the international stage to be cancelled because of COVID-19. Taipei Game Show 2020 was initially scheduled merely 1 week after Global Game Jam, in early February. It was then rescheduled to late June. It seemed to be an educated guess based on Taiwan's experience with SARS. I knew other IT conferences and conventions in Taiwan that were also making similar adjustments at the time. Because we knew that even though SARS hit us hard back in early 2003 and the virus was new to us, the healthcare system in Taiwan were still able to control it and made public space safe again within about just 4 months. So postponing events for about half a year seemed like a reasonable decision. And yet, we were wrong. Despite the fact that Taiwan's healthcare system does an even better job during COVID-19 than during SARS, and has kept our daily lives relatively safer this time around. As the global pandemic situation heated up later in March and April, and the global flight traffic grinded to a halt, all of the postponed events that were expecting international participation had to scramble to change their format to online. So now let me talk a little bit about TGDF, Taipei Game Developers Forum, that I help organize. Right at the start of 2020, we have announced that TGDF will be in July. And we had already started trying to invite international speakers, open up the call for presentation process, book the venue, started seeking sponsors and such. Right after GGJ and the Taipei Game Show, we kind of have to make a decision if we want to keep the option of it being a physical event or not. And after a few weeks of internal discussion, especially after seeing Game Developers Conference changed their format in March to Twitch streams, we thought it is just safer to commit to becoming a fully online conference at this point. But committing to the Twitch stream format means a few things. We didn't have any experience running live streaming events. It was hard for us to charge for conference passes. The potential sponsors at the time were already reluctant to join any kind of events. And for some of them, it was harder for them to reach their audience if the event was online. The overall budget of our conference, of course, went down a lot due to no physical venue required. But our source of funding also went down significantly. Most importantly, the annual conference was a crucial stage for over 1,000 local developers to meet and learn from each other, face to face, building new connections and also a low-cost way for them to interact with international game developers we invite each year in person. and all that had to go. Our healthcare system and our government did a great job at keeping us free of COVID-19 as much as possible. But the game industry and the game developer community are still a globally connected field. Despite our best efforts, we cannot stay unchanged or expect that everything will suddenly return to normal at some specific time in 2021 in the face of this new global phenomenon. Of course, to some parts of our industry, the effect of COVID-19 hasn't been all bad. During the former half of 2020, while the news about the pandemic was growing, I'm sure a lot of people in the game industry also learned that a lot of video games sales, mobile free-to-play games revenue got noticeably better, or the live streaming services got much higher viewerships. Because more and more people had to just stay home and they consumed more of our content. Even though this was good news for some people, you probably also saw the flip side of this situation. And being primarily an organizer that runs events about indie game developers, I saw that indies were the ones that were impacted the most severely. For any aspiring indie game developers that are still trying to establish their presence in the market, or the newcomers that aren't as well connected as the industry veterans, or just generally anyone without their own resources and still mainly relies on conventions and events to get into the field, the current global situation is not in their favor. I know a lot of local indies who wanted to showcase their games at Taipei Game Show back in February for the first time, but couldn't. And as a result, they had to make alternative plans. A lot of the networking and connections that were usually built on those occasions now have to take place in other forms. By May and June, we were starting to see a few game showcases that were fully online, and then some traditionally huge gaming conventions that went virtual as well. There are also events like Steam festivals, which are run by major platform holders. In terms of more B2B-oriented events, right after our TGDF Twitch stream back in July, we also collaborated with The Mix, the Media Indie Exchange, for a small-scale developer-publisher matchmaking event using a cloud gaming platform called Parsec, so that local indie teams can showcase their games to publishers from the other side of the planet in real time, receiving light feedback without requiring them to be in the same room. All of the above helps a lot, and there are more and more of these online events now, giving indie developers the exposure and connections much needed by them. However, we also discuss these events with our local developer friends all the time, and I get the impression that collectively, the industry as a whole still has some way to go in terms of adapting to our new normal. Like, maybe the developers weren't familiar with the online showcase format yet, or the audience weren't used to fully online events that weren't just Twitch streams. And finally, taking myself as an example, as an organizer for a physical conference for 9 years, I still have much to learn when it comes to organizing any kinds of online events. While purely online events probably will never be able to completely replace traditional physical conventions, and the benefits of in-person communication is really hard to recreate even with all these video conferencing technologies we have today, it is also important to recognize that we have some newfound strength that we should leverage. For example, since all we have now are online events, so the traveling costs are mostly gone now for participating in these type of events. I have been fortunate enough to record this video for BIC, and I also know a couple of instances that online conventions in other countries invited some of Taiwanese indies to participate, or Taiwanese indies applied for these types of events for the first time ever, only because they have the capacity to do so now. Which leads to the next point I would like to make. We probably have the best opportunity now, and also in the near future, to reach out to developer communities in other countries and invite them to be a part of our community. And the developer can have more chances to participate in events outside of their own country. I hope that in the post-COVID-19 world, we have an international community in our industry that is more connected than ever. In this spirit, I would like to dedicate the rest of this video to introduce a few Taiwanese indie games to you, and hope you can find them interesting as I do. First of all, there are a few games from Taiwan that were accepted by BIC this year, including Gerritory, which is a 4-player action party game with unique game rules and minimalistic visuals. The player controls cube characters that move and color the tiles. And the player with the highest count of tiles wins. The twist is, when two characters bump into each other, the ones with less tiles crush the other. And there are numerous power-ups, many tiles with special rules in different levels, and you can customize your own maps and set different game objectives as well. The game has been released on Switch, and the PC version will come out in a few months. And this is Fight of Animals, which is a fighting game that features many characters inspired by popular animal memes such as Powerhook Dog, Mighty Fox, or Magic Squirrel, and more. And the controls are simple enough for everyone to pick up and play, but still provides enough depth and character variations for interesting and skillful matchups. It has been on Steam and Switch for some time now, but the PlayStation 4 version just came out very recently. Another game I know that is featured in BIC this time is Dungeon and Puzzles. The game is about clearing out monsters and reach the exit in many dungeon levels, but instead of getting XP points and gold and leveling up your characters and weapons, the hero has to solve delicate puzzles step by step, with different abilities that are provided by various equipment. It also has a very beautiful pixel art style. The game is said to be launching early next year, and it also has a demo version you can currently play on itch.io. Other than the titles that I know that are presented in BIC, I would also like to quickly show a few other Taiwanese indie games that just came out recently or will be released in near future. This is Sky Bandit, a hyper-casual RPG with a simple top-down scrolling gameplay, but also has a rather high skill ceiling. The game has beautiful art, fast-paced combat, and slick control that will challenge your reflexes and focus, and also features various upgrades, power-ups, and equipment that you will have to figure out how to best apply them in different challenges. The game came out on both iOS and Android just last month. Vigil, The Longest Night is a 2D action platformer that rewards precise control and tactics in combat, and also tells a tale of eldritch horror. It features a gloomy, dark, and high-quality visual, horrifying but interesting monster designs, a variety of combat styles provided by different weapons and equipment, and most importantly, all kinds of amazing and epic boss fights. By the time this video comes out, the game will have been just released for PC and Switch, so be sure to check it out. Carto is a charming adventure game wrapped around a unique, world-altering puzzle mechanic. In this game, the player will be using the special power that Carto has to control the world around her so that she can be reunited with her grandmother again. As you find more and more pieces of the game map, you can rearrange them to shape the levels themselves and reveal new areas, new puzzles, and also friends that will help you along the way. The game is coming out right after BIC on all major console platforms and PC, so definitely keep an eye out for this one. Pranti, Fishy Adventure is a 2D action game set under the ocean. The game depicts a future when the human civilization has submerged into the ocean, and the player has to traverse the underwater cities, overcome puzzles and corrupted ocean lives with a versatile swordfish-like partner, and piece together what is the danger that is affecting the world. The game is anticipated to be released early 2021, and you can check out their Steam page for more details. The final one I'd like to bring up is The Legend of Liao Tianding. It is a 2D action platformer with a unique-looking retro comic book art style and a light-hearted story which is based on a combination of Taiwanese history and folklore. You can think of the protagonist as a Taiwanese version of Robin Hood, who fights injustice and reveals the dark secrets of the government with his tanto blade, waist sash, and kung fu. And you can also find out more information on their Steam page. There definitely are many more interesting Taiwanese indie games that I failed to mention here. But you can also check out the information about Taipei Game Show 2021, which is going to be in late January, showcasing a lot of other games that I didn't manage to put in. It has a hybrid setup combining both offline and online content together, and if you're already participating in Taipei Game Show in some capacity, I will be looking forward to checking them out. Finally, while our Taipei Game Developers Forum hasn't set a date in 2021 yet, we also hope that you can stay tuned for our latest news, and we welcome your participation when we have more details about its format and time. And that's it. Thank you for listening, and I definitely would love to go back to Busan for BIC in the future. 감사합니다.